Alrighty, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Recruit Loop Live. It's Paul Slazak here, co-founder and CEO and proud host of today's edition, which is Outsourcing Your HR and Finance Functions, a win-win for any business. On the Zoom call today, this is being recorded, so you'll get to see myself and Nick and Lachlan. And if you have any questions following this webinar after you've watched it, feel free to shoot them through to success@recruitloop.com, and we'll be able to help you. So without any further ado, what I would love to do is introduce our two panelists to you before we launch into everything. Our first panelist is Nick Hedges from Resolve HR. And I know Nick very well. I've known him for many, many years. But for you guys, he's an experienced HR and workplace relations advisor. He's gained extensive experience having held HR management roles in big corporates, boutique organizations, and he's consulted to players in financial services, in startups, professional services, education, manufacturing, retail, and healthcare. And he's the author of the upcoming book, Is Your Team Failing or Kicking Goals? How to Take Control of Your People and Their Performance. And this book, which is going to be out soon, will contain 10 HR blind spots for every business leader to know and address in order to unlock the potential of their people and business. So we've got a guy who knows his stuff on the panel. And we've got another guy who really knows his stuff, Lachlan Grant from Vital Edition. Lachlan is an entrepreneurial finance professional, and through his experience as a CFO and or founder of many startups in media, TV, e-commerce, wholesale and retail, he's developed a clear understanding of what it really takes to succeed and how best to manage the finances of any sized business. He is the CEO of Vital Edition, a firm that specialises in all aspects of finance for startups and small to medium enterprises. And his favourite topics to educate his 1,000+ strong client base are the 4 I's of finance and getting your economics right. That's the formal stuff. I know these two guys and they're very cool. So it's a pleasure to have them both on. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Lachlan. Are we ready to rock and roll?
Thanks for having us.
Definitely.
It's a pleasure. So let's just set the scene. And what I wanted to do here is just read out the little bit of the blurb that came from the promo material that really positions what we're going to be talking about today. And for anyone not in a position to have a dedicated human resources or finance specialist on staff, it's definitely worth considering engaging an expert HR consultant or an outsourced CFO. And aside from not having to add these two full-time salaries to a P&L, there are several benefits, obviously, to outsourcing these specialist functions and knowing that you've got someone on the end of the phone if an unexpected urgent need arises. We've had questions come in from people, guys, that couldn't join today. And we know that we covered some stuff on our prep call. But Nick, can I start with you this afternoon? And let's look at first how, from your experience, an external specialist, in your case, external HR specialist, can really understand a business as a third party. How have you gone about building those relationships and really getting to know your clients as the impartial?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Paul, and probably a good place to start. I think there's a number of aspects to your question, and when I think about sort of being an external specialist, it's interesting because whilst yes, we are external and we're not a permanent resource, from a psychological or philosophical perspective, I really like to think that we are part of the business, and in a sense. People use the word partnering a lot, but I mean, I think the partnering sort of tag works very well. And so it's really to work in conjunction with their businesses in terms of being a person who's got their back, and an external specialist really is understanding their business by being involved with their business. So you've got to have a lot of contact. You've got to have the regular phone calls, the regular face-to-face meetings. You've got to have upcoming projects and things that you're working on. At the end of the day, it's a business partnership that is not considered like what I would consider, what I would term, I should say, as a one-off. This is an ongoing relationship that is really important for both parties. Yes, we're getting paid for a service, but at the end of the day, we want to deliver value and we want to deliver a good service to them. So often it doesn't make sense for a company or a business to have a permanent, in this case, HR person. That their business couldn't justify it. They might only have 5 to 10 employees, or 15 employees, 20. So small businesses. So it doesn't make sense for them to have a permanent resource, but for them to have access to someone like a service that we provide, for example, does make sense, because they're not paying at the level of a full-time resource, but they've certainly got the expertise that comes along with it. So giving access, I think, is a good way for us to be able to understand their business.
It's definitely the same with us and with an independent recruiter, really getting to know the customer, not being that one-hit wonder. Lachlan, what about from your perspective? Do you want to throw in from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, from a finance perspective, there's inherent kind of trust that an external advisor kind of is already kind of fairly common in the kind of finance and accounting world. So, people will bring us in and kind of want our external opinion, our expertise, our kind of best practice, understanding of what a finance function should be like, because they wouldn't necessarily have that in-house. In terms of how we can make sure that, we truly understand their business from a commercial point of view, to actually can add value in terms of being their kind of business partner in finance. We always make sure we spend enough time kind of really understanding the business model and kind of the vision and the strategy behind the business, and also challenging that as well with different CEOs and founders that we work with, and that invariably that helps us really understand where they're at, what are some of their kind of key kind of pain points, what are their kind of some of their assumptions they're not sure about, and I can give them a lot of assurance that they've got the right people working with them. So there's kind of a baseline of we just want our finance function to work properly at best of class, and everything's kind of tight from a safe pair of hands point of view. But in terms of really understanding their business, a big part of that's just building a relationship over time. And to our kind of and the team's credit, we've managed to do that with quite a few businesses, and that just takes time. And in some respects, going through and jumping into the trenches together and kind of working through different business issues.
And from the get-go, sorry, go ahead, Nick. Go.
I was just going to say on top of that, because I think what Lachlan's saying is really important. The trust is important, and I think one of the practical applications that external specialists can do, particularly in a finance function or an HR function or those sorts of things, is that we can actually perform an audit. We can get on site. We can see, look, what have you currently got? Is it working? Is it compliant? Does it run instead with the regulations and all of those sorts of things that are in place? So I think that's often a good starting point in a practical understanding of the business. And often we're often blinded as business owners by being in our businesses, and we can't often get a higher perspective. So we can come in an understanding of doing some practical applications, setting up a framework, and then working through on whatever.
There's a lot of basic principles, like in finance, the accounting standards are the same, across a variety of businesses. So there's kind of basic principles we can kind of always pick up, and we're kind of trained to do that. But kind of digging into the business further requires time and building that relationship. But whether that's in-house or outsourced, it'd be the same. It'd be the same process. Bringing on a finance person.
And what I was going to ask before is when you're dealing with this organization, are you both dealing with the decision maker from the get-go, or are you maybe meeting other people in the business and then your work is escalating up the line, or are you coming straight in at the top so that you've got full access to the business from the beginning? How have you found it typically happens? Lachlan?
I think from a finance point of view, normally it's from the very top. So whether it's the board or the CEO, know they need, our services, and then we'll kind of filter down, into the different parts of the organization. That is kind of how it normally happens in practice, but also it's the best way to do it, so that, we've at least got some authority, kind of walk in and kind of understand the business and talking to different people. It's the best way to for the team to process change. as part of us joining.
Yeah, I would concur. I think, I mean, really and look, my business is centered around servicing small, medium businesses. So often it's a business owner that I'm dealing with directly, or very, very senior management. So really they've identified a problem, whether it be at board level or, senior management, executive level. And so, yeah, we're often dealing with the higher echelons of the organisation, but then filtering through as we need, as the work requires.
Perfect. The next core question I just want to cover is, how can someone trust an external party like yourselves with their organisation's internal issues? So sometimes it's some really sensitive stuff. We're not just talking about budgets, P&Ls, balance sheets, etc. There are people issues, and you're really getting inside, and yet you're the external. So how do people build that trust, or how do you build the trust with them, and how do they feel trust in you when they're like opening up their organisation to you? Lachlan, do you want to jump in first?
I think from a finance point of view, I mean, just showing your finances and your kind of cash flow to anyone is normally a very personal thing, especially when it's a business owned by one or two people. It's kind of a way to really see how the business is going, regardless of kind of what's media and what's happening in marketing, which is important when you're kind of out there on the kind of sales track. But opening up your finances is quite daunting and kind of a personal thing, like I said. So, part as an accountant, we're professionals. We've got our own professional standards, which we follow. And that's certainly a kind of a trusted kind of role in society. And we're always very conscious to make sure we uphold a certain level of standards. But I think also it's how we approach kind of, if there are issues, or how we approach that. I always, seek to reassure all our clients, this is not a lie, this is true, that, that we've seen it all. There's no issue you've got that we wouldn't be able to help you with, or that we know people kind of to pull in and help. And this, every business has their own issues. So it's not like, we're not here to kind of, to judge you. It's more we're here to help. And that's always our approach. Any client, we're here to kind of be a part of the team and help. And there's always confidentiality, etc. But, that more often than not, kind of helps us and helps them, our kind of client, relax and kind of get us involved in fixing problems if they are there.
Yeah, from my perspective, Paul, I think it's a good question. I think that firstly, the business owners often don't even know what their own issues are. They just know that there's issues. They're not specialists in what they do.
Very true.
Yeah, they're specialists in making widgets or the service that they're providing, right? So having someone like us come in terms of a trust perspective, which is what you asked, for me, these relationships are really they're personal relationships that you end up building with business owners. They have to trust you. It has to work. I mean, you wouldn't go see your doctor or medical professional or anything like that if you didn't have a level of trust. I mean, there's umpteen numbers of doctors out there, but we only choose to go to one. And that's because we trust them and we've got a personal relationship with them at some level. Yeah. And I think the same goes with services that, in a sense, all three of us are providing, really. So like Lachlan, whilst financial information and of a company is personal, so too are salaries of people and policies that they hold and all those sorts of inner workings. So I think it's how the question of how do you trust is knowing, does the consultant, what have they done? Who have they worked for? What is their credibility? At the end of the day, these are personal relationships, and you have to feel comfortable with that consultant. And I think it's important for consultants to share experiences that they've had with other clients, not necessarily divulging confidential information, but sharing the experience of, we've had similar experiences to what you've encountered here, and this is typically how we've gone about solving those sorts of problems.
And I guess on this issue from the other side of the table, somebody could say, actually, no, I'm not comfortable showing you all of this, or I'm not comfortable even engaging like this. What about from your side, if you don't think it's a fit, and you actually then, once you've seen everything, you think, my God, this could be a complete catastrophe. Or Nick, you think, I'm just walking into a minefield here. It's the same with us. We sometimes see organisations who've had 74 people leave in the last 3 months. and they think we're going to be the ones to stop that. And we say, actually, no, we can't help you. Is that something that you guys come across as well? The actual need to say, you know what, we're not the fit right now.
There are times where, and it's probably less to do with the problem, more to do with the attitude. And then if someone's not willing to see the change, then that's hard for us to do our job and our role. I would always, in that scenario, try and give my kind of honest opinion as to why I don't think they're ready for us, or that it's not kind of worth them spending money, or we're not the right people for them. And that's an ethical decision as much as anything else. That's very rare for us in terms of kind of the clients we deal with and people we approach, but it doesn't say, not to say it doesn't happen. And you kind of tend to pick up pretty quickly when you can foresee issues that would arise.
Absolutely.
And I think from my perspective, I think to the point really, Paul, there has to be a fit. If you're not comfortable on both sides, and for us, it's important that you have a fit. It's important that you can feel that you've got a level of rapport and a level of relationship that you could significantly develop. I mean, we often talk about in programs that we talk about, particularly around culture, when you're dealing with your team, to not just be dealing at a high level surface, but to dig deep, like that iceberg sort of analogy, that you only see the tip of the iceberg. So it's important from our perspective that we hold a relationship that develops trust, and that involves going fairly deep, with somebody in terms of, where their thoughts are, the way they see their business, the way they see it moving forward, what are the current problems, and having that sort of open and honest relationship. And so there has to be a fit. And if we don't feel that, we would be prepared to walk away.
Yeah, I get it, definitely. We've talked about dedicated external consultants, but how dedicated is dedicated? In your bio, like when I said 1,000 plus clients, Nick, I've known you forever and I know how many clients you work with. Does someone feel that when there's an external advisor working with them, that you're sort of completely spread so thin, or do they get a sense of how dedicated will be to the company specifically? Nick?
From my perspective, I think it's important that you set expectations up front. So, we work on sort of customizing a delivery for clients where possible. So, it's setting up, well, what access do you want, and then having some flexibility around that access. So if they want us at their workplace for half a day a week or a day a week, let's set that up. That's fine. And then we need scope around that. Things are going to happen also outside of that dedicated time. So dedicated for me is that I'll always say to them, you can always call me. You can always have access to me. In terms of written delivery, that depending on sort of the deadlines, we'll always obviously do our best to get them to you as soon as possible. But I think it's a matter of having those expectations with the client in terms of what is required, and setting up a scope and a framework that works for both sides.
Lachlan, I'm sure you can echo that exactly, but have you got some examples you want to give there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of for us in terms of our kind of outsourced finance team part of the business, it's critical to get that right. And, we kind of spent a good kind of year or two refining that when we were first starting out, because, it's always a question we ask. I mean, if you've got, how many clients as kind of one individual kind of CFO and finance team, how do you kind of manage? Am I getting less of your time as you're getting bigger? So the way we kind of solve that is to make sure our clients know that there's finance teams, and those teams have a set capacity, so there won't be any more than kind of 5 days a week of work for that team, and they've kind of got that team at their service. Now, that kind of helps us kind of scale up our engagement as they need to, but we're always super clear with what outcomes, do they want, how much is that going to cost, and then we'll always have a kind of quarterly review just to go through, well, is it working for you? Is it working for us? Just more stuff you want us to do, stuff you don't think is getting done, and that open communication, I think, is the best way to kind of manage that. And then, to the credit of our clients, they'll grow to a point where they need to kind of bring someone in-house in some certain roles. And that's great for us, because we're happy that we've been a part of that journey. Because there's kind of a cost benefit eventually to have your own in-house team. But
yeah, it's like recruiting enough people until they need an internal recruiter, and then we have to go. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I think the beauty of our business is we can always kind of have touch points to that business, whether it's through income tax, through FBT, and whether it's kind of just pure CFO consulting, not the bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff is fairly modular for us.
I mean, it sounds like for both, I mean, the concept of a bespoke solution, you've got projects, engagements, service level agreements, scopes of work. You're both working like that. We do as well, and this is part of the external but dedicated, and it works. Sorry, I've got drilling downstairs today.
Okay.
Sorry about the noise. Nick, did you want to add anything else there before we launch into the next topic?
No, I think between us, we've probably covered all of that. I think that, I think it's really the crux of that question around what is a dedicated resource is really around setting the expectations between both parties. So what is it that they're looking for? What is it that, we realistically can provide as well? And in cases I've turned around to clients saying, look, I don't think we're the right solution for you. You're better off probably having a permanent solution in-house, and we're happy to come in from time to time and help with other specialist things that perhaps that person can't do. So I think it's a matter of having those honest conversations with them.
And I think, that leads on very nicely to the next question, which is is there a target industry or company size where it makes sense to outsource? Lachlan, you mentioned when they've grown to a point where they'll bring it in. We see when you've got this many, an internal talent acquisition person replaces the external recruiter. We get that. But is there an industry type or a sector or a size of company where this solution is perfect, the bespoke, modular, whatever terms we used before around project engagement levels, and you're still there on the phone when it works best and when it doesn't?
Yeah, I think from a finance point of view, startups and SMEs, they're kind of, that's our kind of pitch of our kind of client base, and I don't think it's really a specific industry, although normally it's kind of software businesses who are kind of heavy on kind of invoicing and data and all that kind of stuff, as well as agencies that are probably more on the creative side as opposed to the commercial side. So they certainly need more heavy kind of commercial advice. Financial services. That certainly is a lot of complex kind of financial management that goes on with those type of businesses, and that's kind of our kind of sweet spot. But we'll and we kind of pride ourselves on having a really diverse client base, and that's kind of the beauty of being an accountant. There's kind of a basic accounting framework you can pick up in any business, and we just kind of learn the business model as we go. Now, in terms of scaling to a certain size, it's really hard to say. I mean, it really depends on how commercial the other leaders in the business are, how demanding kind of their own clients and their kind of people are for kind of attention to finance issues. So say for one of our SaaS clients, they got to a point where they just needed, they had, I think, about 5,000 clients. So they needed someone to be in there day in, day out answering all the questions. And it's made more sense for them to hire kind of a bookkeeper / admin office manager than having us there. But we still do the reporting and the CFOing for that client. But they're kind of getting the best result because they've got someone that's kind of sitting next to the kind of sales and ops team that can just kind of handle those queries. And that's when it comes down to responsiveness, we are as responsive as we can be. But when you've got 8 other clients in a pod you've got to manage, there's going to be some sort of delay. And most clients understand that when they're growing to a certain size, but once their clients are demanding more from finance and we can't service that, then that's an opportunity for us to kind of pause and reflect and then just go through the engagement and rescope it.
And what about from HR?
Yeah, look, I think from our own experience, the size of business typically for us in a small medium wouldn't probably be too dissimilar to what Lachlan's described. But I mean, I typically talk to clients around our offering is anywhere from about 5 employees to around about 130, 140 employees. I think at that higher end, they'd certainly need to be wanting to look at some sort of permanent resource, even if it's not full-time, at least in some sort of part-time capacity, to take care of some of those more operational issues that'll come through. But essentially, are there industries or particular things? No, I think the legislation is universal across all industries. The principles of best practice of HR that come through are certainly universal across all industries. So we're not particularly discriminatory in terms of identifying particular industries or businesses. And I think at the end of the day, there's pros and cons always for having a permanent resource or not having a permanent resource. Yeah. I think, and I think each individual business needs to weigh up what would be best for them. And at the end of the day, consultancies like ours, and even like Lachlan's, who offer not just in his case an accounting specific, but or in our case just HR consulting. There's so many different things that we can offer within that, and within HR there's so many different disciplines, if you like. Yeah. There's the work health and safety, there's remuneration, there's the legal side. So we offer all of that as a business, and I think that's where sometimes the failing of one permanent resource cannot add as much value. Yep. Depending on the size of that business.
We had a question actually come in yesterday from someone who's registered but couldn't make it. And she was asking what you guys think of all the software and the apps and tools that are out there, almost to create a DIY scenario. So you've got the onboarding apps, you've got Xero, which supposedly says let's make a beautiful business, where people might think they can do it alone. And you look at some of these tools and they look pretty sophisticated. There's templates and there's checklists and people can self-onboard. Surely there still is the place for the human. As we've said, where people say, is AI taking over the role of the recruiter? We say, no, AI helps the recruiter, but the person still needs to be there. Have you found people pushing back on, well, let me do this because I've got insert name of onboarding software, or have you helped them through it, Nick? Where have you seen this potentially eat into your patch?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the advancement of technology, particularly in something like HR, where you can get analytics and technology to help you make decisions, I think is important. But equally, and I'm sure this is universal across most industries, it can't replace the human element of things. So, there are particular programs that are able to house it's like an employee database. It's got all their information, their leave, their pay information, or whatever it is, and might even house particular policies. And some platforms offer generic type of policies. At the end of the day, we've played a role in refining those, making sure they're more compliant, making sure that they relate specifically to the business that we're talking about. And a good example of that could actually be something like an alcohol in the workplace policy. Some need a zero tolerance. If you're a building and construction sort of client or industry, you cannot afford to have any alcohol. Whereas if you're a professional services firm, well, you've got the Friday afternoon drinks from time to time, or you've got those Thursday drinks or whatever. So does zero alcohol actually apply? And often these policies are so rigid. So a specialist is required. And those online tools are very helpful with that to start as a base. But I don't think it particularly can replace. The other area, and we've both seen this, Paul, would be around psychological profiling and those sorts of things. Oh, yeah. And getting interpretations of those. And a report can tell you X, Y, and Z, but really, what is there anything else to be interpreted from it? So, and I think they're good examples of, yes, technology is needed, and I think the advancement of it is essential, and can help businesses, but I don't think it necessarily completely replaces the human element.
And Lachlan, with like Expensify or Receipt Bank integrating into Xero, people probably think, oh, it's all automated, it don't need anybody. Surely you step right in.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, even for us, those apps are great because they'll kind of save us time. And we can always, if our clients prefer to do it themselves, we can always train them to do that. Invariably, outsourcing your finance function is not so much about kind of trying to do it yourself, because it's about the time and the headspace. It's really the headspace to do it. People get daunted by the idea of kind of processing numbers and kind of going through that and understanding, well, if I make a mistake, there's kind of consequences here because I might get my taxes wrong, or all that kind of stuff is still quite complex. So yeah, invariably most clients want us to do it and are happy to use the system because it's just easier and better for the whole team. But we haven't really had much pushback with people trying to do it all themselves. If they want to do it themselves, we're always happy to train them and set them on their way. And we always recommend us reviewing kind of any work that they do. But yeah, I think it's more about making kind of life easier for, I suppose, the accountant, and just make things much more streamlined for the business. So the expenses aren't kind of sitting on someone's desk and you're wondering if it's being paid, and you can see that all in the different apps you've got. So everyone's got some comfort around that. So yeah, I think it's for the better, but I don't really see it replacing what we do anytime soon. So.
Thank you. And I think with what the three of us do, it's about educating the client that you can do it yourself, but we're here to actually, as experts, do it to prevent some future problem that may occur if somebody tried to run a full executive recruitment process alone without having done it for 25 years, or run a termination process the wrong way, which could land them in severely boiling water. Or like you said, Lachlan, the tax man comes knocking and says, you've done something really wrong here. And we're coming in and we're looking at everything. And you're there to prevent that.
And just to that point, Paul, and using recruitment as an example, I recently just wrote an article where it costs the employer just as much time and effort to recruit a bad hire as it does to recruit the good hire. So, to that point, yes, technology can help you, and technology is important, and having these reporting tools and all those things, but having the right advice, if you like, or the right support around you is crucial. So the costs of getting those decisions wrong 2 months later because you made the bad hire, and you've got to go through it all again. It doesn't make sense, right? So just relying on technology just to make decisions for you often clearly wouldn't make commercial sense.
Thank you, guys. I like to keep our learning lunches to about 30 minutes, and we are there. But for people listening in, if you are thinking of the dedicated external specialist consultant, Nick can be reached on nick@resolvehr.com.au, and Lachlan can be reached on lachlan.grant@vitaledition.com.au. If you do want to go back to any of what we talked about, the recording of today is in our resources centre, along with other panel webinars from the past. So thank you again to our expert panellists today from the HR and outsourced CFO space, Nick and Lachlan. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for listening in, and Nick, Lachlan, thank you for contributing. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.